They said she overdosed. Bam, case closed. Except 2 years later, the whole thing flips and people start asking, wait, was this actually a homicide? This is the story of Amelia Salehpour, an 18-year-old from Southern California whose death went from tragic overdose to, hold on, this looks suspicious, in one of the wildest case twists Los Angeles has seen in years. Amelia Salehpour was 18, legally grown, but still a kid in all the ways that mattered. She grew up in Southern California, the kind of place where the sun is always out, but the real life struggles hit just as hard as anywhere else. She had been fighting addiction and mental health challenges for years. Her parents say she had a soft heart, a trusting soul, and the emotional maturity of someone much younger, which basically means she was walking around with a giant sign on her back that said, easy to take advantage of. She was trying to get better, trying to get clean. She checked herself into rehab, took a breath, and tried to reset her life. But recovery isn't a straight line. And like a lot of kids who struggle, she drifted toward people who weren't exactly leading her toward stability. Her parents, they were worried non-stop. Her dad, Ali, a retired tech guy with serious professional background, spent every day calling, checking, hoping she was safe. Her mom, Sue, was the emotional anchor, the one who saw every red flag before anyone else did. To them, Amelia wasn't a statistic. She wasn't another teenager with addiction issues. She was their child, vulnerable, emotional, and constantly trying to climb uphill. And that's what makes this story sting. Because the system saw addict, they saw trouble. But the people who actually knew her, they saw a girl trying her hardest to survive. After weeks in rehab, Amelia makes one decision that changes everything. She checks herself out, and she doesn't leave with supportive friends or a family member. Nope, she walks out with her ex-boyfriend and a guy he calls Raider. Yeah, Raider. Because nothing says safe and stable environment like a dude nicknamed after a video game villain. The two guys take her straight to a house in Van Nuys, deep in the San Fernando Valley, and this place is bad news from the moment you hear about it. We're talking a house crawling with strangers, heavy drug use, zero supervision, and the kind of energy where you check your pockets every 5 seconds. Her parents immediately panic. They know this isn't a house, it's a sinkhole. They call the police. They email. They beg officers to check on her. They literally say she is vulnerable and in danger. And here comes the first mini twist. Police show up, walk to the side gate, knock. No answer. Bam, they leave. No backup. No insistence. No, hey, maybe we should actually go inside. Just a 1-minute cameo appearance from the LAPD. Meanwhile, Amelia is inside that house, scared, unstable, surrounded by people who do not have her best interests in mind. She made one wrong turn, and the system didn't bother to follow her in. The day after Amelia lands in that house, her dad pushes harder. He calls police again. He tells them his daughter is vulnerable, not thinking clearly, and surrounded by people who absolutely should not be trusted with houseplants, let alone a teenager. So officers go back. But this time, man, the effort is barely there. They get permission to check part of the property, not all of it. They walk through a few rooms, poke their heads around, take a light stroll like they're touring an apartment, not searching for an endangered girl. And then they leave. Just like that. This was the moment where everything could have changed. One more door, one more room, one more minute of actual searching. But nope, they're out. And then only a few hours after police walk away, someone inside the exact same house calls and says, "There's a girl in the garage. She's not breathing." That's the part that hits you right in the stomach. Police were literally on the property earlier that day. And still, they never reached the one place where Amelia actually was. When officers return, they find her in the garage. There's drug stuff, nearby syringes, a spoon residue, the classic overdose setup you'd see in a textbook. So the medical examiner arrives, looks things over, sees the drug scene, and just stamps it. accidental overdose. No deeper examination, no questions, no full autopsy. Let me repeat that. An 18-year-old dies in a suspicious house, and nobody bothers to do a complete autopsy. That should have been the end of the whole story. Case closed. Next file. Move on. But this case had other plans. Amelia's parents look at the official story and immediately go, yeah, no, absolutely not. Her dad, Ali, retired tech guy, sharp analytical, starts digging through every detail. Her mom, Sue, all heart, all instinct, refuses to let anyone sweep this under the rug. Together, they become the kind of parents you do not want to underestimate. They hire a private investigative team, not YouTube detectives, real investigators, people who've seen enough shady situations to know when something feels off. These investigators start interviewing people from the house. They follow timelines. They collect statements. They look at the physical environment with fresh eyes, something the original team didn't do deeply. And then the big move. The family orders a private autopsy. New pathologist, new perspective, no shortcuts. When he examines Amelia's neck, he points out something the original exam missed. Injuries that could match pressure, the kind of pressure you don't get from collapsing during an overdose. And that's the moment where everything flips on its head. The private pathologist says the pattern may indicate strangulation. Not definite, but possible, and definitely worth re-investigating. So now we have two versions of the same tragedy. Version 1, accidental overdose. Version 2 could be a staged scene hiding a killing. And suddenly the case that was closed isn't closed anymore. Once the private autopsy lands, everything in Los Angeles law enforcement starts wobbling like a chair with one broken leg. Some detectives stick to the original story. Overdose, end of discussion. They point to the drug scene, the residue, the history, the usual checklist. But others start looking at the new findings and go, hold on, this doesn't look right. You suddenly have two teams inside the same system reading the same case and coming to completely different conclusions. One side sees drugs, the other side sees pressure marks. One side wants it filed away. The other side wants answers. It gets even messier when charges briefly get filed against people connected to the house. That moment makes everyone think, okay, they're finally taking this seriously. And then out of nowhere, those charges are dropped. Everything stalls. Everything freezes. And nobody seems to agree on what actually happened. Imagine watching people argue over a puzzle. While the picture is literally a young girl who deserved better, the system starts bending under its own confusion. It tries to stand by the overdose ruling. But the evidence won't sit quietly. And that tension, that's how you know something is deeply wrong. Amelia's parents reach a point where talking isn't enough. Waiting isn't enough. Trusting the system definitely isn't enough. So they do the one thing that forces people to pay attention. They file a lawsuit against the city of Los Angeles, and the lawsuit doesn't mince words. They say police didn't take their daughter seriously. They say officers moved too slowly. They say the search was weak, incomplete, and carried out like a casual walkthrough instead of an urgent rescue. They point out that officers were literally on the property hours before Amelia was found, and still somehow didn't find her. That alone raises eyebrows. They argue the system wrote Amelia off the moment they heard addiction, like her life mattered less, like she didn't deserve the same urgency as anyone else. And here's the uncomfortable part. You start to see their point. If Amelia had been wealthy, stable, or perfectly healthy, would the initial investigation have been so quick? Would they have skipped a full autopsy on an 18-year-old girl in a suspicious environment? Would they have left that house after one knock? Her parents don't think so. And honestly, a lot of people watching this case don't think so either. The lawsuit becomes more than a lawsuit. It becomes a statement. Someone messed up, and we're not letting it slide. By now, the case is basically living in two parallel universes. In one universe, the official one, Amelia died from an accidental overdose. Open and shut. Nothing to see here. Move along. In the other universe, the one built by her parents' investigation, the story looks completely different. The injuries don't match a simple collapse. The garage scene feels staged, and the timeline makes no sense unless someone else was involved. These two realities keep crashing into each other over and over. Detectives argue, experts disagree. Everybody looks at the same facts and somehow walks away with totally different conclusions. It gets even worse when you realize something. The entire investigation never would have shifted if the parents hadn't spent their own money. No private investigators, no private autopsy, no pressure. This case stays filed under Overdose forever. That's the part nobody says out loud, but everyone can feel it. The system didn't reopen this case because it cared. It reopened it because the family forced it to. And when two realities exist side by side like that, it's only a matter of time before one of them breaks. When you zoom out, Amelia's story becomes bigger than one tragedy. It exposes how fast the system labels vulnerable kids, how easily an overdose ruling gets handed out, how quickly people with addiction are treated like they're already gone even when they're still alive. It shows what happens when a case gets processed instead of investigated. When a young girl isn't seen as a person, but as a category. It raises real questions. Why didn't officers search the whole property? Why wasn't a full autopsy done? Why did it take private money to get anyone to look twice? And here's the brutal part, the part that sticks. If Amelia had been wealthy, famous, connected, or perfect on paper, would this investigation have looked different? Most people think yes. Her parents definitely think yes. And honestly, watching the timeline, it's hard not to agree. This case isn't just about what happened to Amelia. It's about what didn't happen for her. That's the part that hits hardest. Here's the twist that stays with you long after the headlines fade. If Amelia's parents hadn't fought, if they hadn't hired investigators, if they hadn't paid for a second autopsy, the official story would still be the only story. Overdose, case closed. No questions, no pressure, no contradictions, no pushback, just silence. And that's the scariest part of all. Not just how she died, but how easily her death could have been misread, mislabeled, and forgotten. Her case forces a bigger, uncomfortable truth into the light. Some families get answers, not because the system works, but because they can afford to challenge it. Amelia didn't get that second chance from the city. She got it because her parents refused to let her vanish behind a lazy conclusion. And now the world is left staring at a question the system still hasn't answered. Was this really an overdose? Or was it something much darker that almost slipped through the cracks? Either way, one thing is clear. This case was never as simple as they said it was. That's the story.